This episode is brought to you by Pixel 2 Editions, a full-service fine art printing company. More about them later. Hello and welcome to In the Art Scene podcast, an art podcast that has it all. I'm your host, Galina Marquez, and I invite fascinating people to talk about their personal creative journeys, success stories, and inspiration. We talk about art business and marketing, how to find your creative voice, and all the new trends in the art world like NFT, AI, and such. Join me and my guest for today's conversation. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to In the Art Scene podcast. And I hope it's a very nice sunny March day when you're listening to us, because right now, as we're recording, it's a very gloomy and rainy day in San Diego. And I am with Allison Davis, an amazing photographer I have met on Voltaire Street Artists and Makers Walk. If you remember, guys, at the end of the year, I had a bonus episode with Aaron Knoll, and we were talking about that. And I actually went to that art walk and I met Allison, and I thought, oh my God, that's going to be a great story for the podcast. So here we are today. Hello, Allison. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Doing great, except for, it's gloomy and I really want to stay in bed.
It is like a snow day to us when it's rainy.
Yes,
it's like, we're
right.
just going to stay inside, and it's literally just cloudy.
Yeah. So I'm having my coffee. I hope you're having your coffee. So introduce yourself while I'm slurping my coffee a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'm Allison Davis, and I am a landscape and fine art photographer who got into this during the pandemic. I've been a wedding and portrait photographer for 14 years. And during the pandemic, when I couldn't photograph people, I jumped into what really inspired me to move out to California, which was the coast. So I've been the girl with the camera in their hand since middle school. I've shot everything from news to nonprofits, travel, anything, anything and everything. But this was my first attempt at a personal project as an artist.
And the project is actually amazing. So to you guys, do you understand? While everyone was on lockdown, Allison took her camera and traveled along the coast, the West Coast. So it's California, Washington, right? Or Oregon, Washington,
Oregon.
The whole shebang. And she was taking pictures along the way. And how long was your journey?
So I made it my goal to photograph the entire West Coast within 30 days.
Within 30 days.
So I had like a brief timeline in my mind, and it turned out that I had to cover about 100 to 150 miles of coastline every day. And I tried to photograph what I could discover as the most interesting or beautiful place within that section of land. And then I camped in my car along the way for the majority of the trip, and did it as like bare bones. Like I had like 2 buckets of stuff with me and camera gear, and that was it,
Wow. Well, that's a trip. I have never been anywhere further north than San Francisco. Yeah.
There's a lot to see.
Yes, and you put everything in your book. So you have done your journey. You did it within a month. What month was that?
So I did it between the last 2 weddings I had scheduled for 2020, because every client canceled or moved their wedding, and I didn't get new bookings. And so the only 2 clients I had left, one moved their wedding to Vegas in September, and then another one just got married in their backyard in October. So I had this window of 32 days between 2 weddings, and I did the trip on 30 of those days.
So September and October, which is pretty nice in Southern California, but I assume it was not as nice and sunny up north. So walk me through. So you drove from San Diego up and then down.
Yeah. So my first day, I drove all the way up. I slept in Monterey. I popped into a little small pocket of Big Sur to shoot a little bit, camped in Monterey. And then that next morning when I woke up was actually when all the wildfires were going crazy around San
Yeah.
Francisco. And I was driving through San Francisco and it was that apocalyptic, you know, I don't even, I was so concerned. I was like, what am I even doing? The sky is on fire and I'm trying to photograph the entire West Coast in 30 days. And I was like, there are fires everywhere. I mean, highways were shut down, campsites were shut down. And then add the pandemic to it, right? Like there were
Yeah.
still tons of things that were inaccessible and shut down. And I was like, well, I'm this far and all I have is time. And my hope was that surely over 30 days I can come away with at least 20 to 30 images for a fine art collection. Like surely I can do at least that. So that was my main goal and I was like, well, I'm just going to see what I see and try to find something beautiful in it. But honestly, even that second day was horrifying because the conditions were literally the time no one could do anything, would do anything. And I was just pressing through as an artist to be like, there has to be something in this world we're documenting in
Did
30
you
days.
did you document the wildfires? I mean, the
I
sky was
did a little
amazing.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah. We've seen it here in San Diego too. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, so I broke the book apart into like a small introduction to kind of introduce like who I am, my vision as an artist, like what brought me to California, kind of like a backstory. Then I did the introduction or the four, I guess it'd be part one was from San Diego up to the top of Washington. So I included those images from San Francisco because they honestly give the context for the entirety of the book because smoke and wildfires kept playing like a character in my art. Like it would just keep popping in. And there's so many metaphors about smoke, I wrote about and just having clarity in life and just when trauma and disaster happens, like how we react to it. And so that was like the setting for the stage. And then I did 27 days shooting all the way back down to Sunset Cliffs in San Diego. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, well,
Yeah, and I
well,
had no idea that's
I
what
was
was
just,
gonna happen.
yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around like this kind of, like, the timing was like incredible for you to, yeah, like encapsulate so much. Like the whole
Yeah,
world is in shock. Yeah, the wildfires are on top of that. And it's just it's like I'm still trying to wrap my head around. But the shots that you did are absolutely stunning. I have seen your book. It's just it's amazing. What was aside from the San Francisco and apocalyptic fires and everything,
yeah.
what was the most remarkable um, scene or event for you during this journey?
I mean, honestly, for me, it was all of it. It was the idea that like what I was trying to do was like I would just keep hiking out to the edge of something I didn't know, I hadn't seen, I had maybe, or I had maybe seen it once, that I barely researched, and it was just this exploration for beauty because I was at this point where I was like, this year and life has just fallen apart and this is a really hard season. We're all going through it in some way and still dealing with the fallout of it. And I was just trying to find something beautiful despite the circumstance because there was nothing beautiful about what was going on. But I think that life isn't perfect and that you can still find beauty in everything. And it was just a giant exercise as an artist for me to prove that
Yeah,
like you can still find something beautiful in what's before you. And then, like I didn't see the sun for 8 days. So
it's
imagine shooting like coastal Washington. People would look at me and they would say, "Oh, it's really beautiful when you can see the mountains on that other side of the lake." And I couldn't see more than 10 feet in front of me.
it's
And so I'm
crazy.
photographing what I can see and what I can share, but everybody's telling me like, "Oh, well, it's so much better during this time." And I'm like, you can't shoot everything at the perfect circumstances. And I think those photos like they're beautiful, but even San Diego, like people always show San Diego as like the most radiant sunset city that's ever existed on the planet. And I'm like, it happens 7 times in a year, and
Yeah,
that's impression we give to the world of what San Diego is, and it's not honest. Those 7 days are freaking glorious, and I love them. and they'll sit with me in my heart for forever. But there's just still beauty in every day. And I just don't think the world's a fantasy. I don't know. Or I don't want to like propagate that, that everything's always like
No,
just okay.
I totally admire that. It's really being honest, and it's like you in this situation, you are not only an artist, you are also like a journalist. You documented a very specific event, and you captured the moments that are not only honest from the natural standpoint, but also, you know, they're loaded with emotions. That time was really loaded for everybody. So like your book will be, 10, 15, 50, 100 years from now, like that's what was going on there.
Yeah. And like it's a part of my heart. Like my background was in journalism. I went to school to be a journalist, but newspapers were falling apart when when that era. And I think an artist's job, like I talked to one friend about it and he put it in such a way that's always stuck with me. I'm like, an artist's job in the world is to illuminate things and to share something, whether it's something true or something interesting or something beautiful. Like should be something that you're trying to share. And for me, it's that like life isn't perfect, but it can be really beautiful. And it can just be an exercise in that. And like, that's also why I chose to photograph the natural not man-made spaces. So there's not a lot of human architecture or human involvement in the images. There's very, very few. And if they're in there, they're like very intentional. But I wanted to show that like, because I come from the point of view, I'm a Christian, I believe in God, and I believe in his work as a creator. And so this is a place to show that like God created all of this, and the world and the ocean, it moves every day, whether we see it or not. And there's things that are happening out there that he set into motion and we get to enjoy, and like we can just go be a part of that. And like, I love architecture and I love cities and all this kind of stuff too, but like I'm really drawn to those natural untouched spaces.
Yeah. I want to drill down a little bit, go back to your background. So you have not been an artist like, I mean, you have been a girl with a camera since you were in school, right? But you didn't consider yourself an artist until a certain point, right? So can you
Correct.
walk us through a little bit through your background? So how did I mean, obviously you fell in love with the photography. So did you go study photography? How did you end up in journalism? What was that like for you? And how did you end up being a fine artist?
Yeah, I mean it's a fun and wild journey, and it's one of those things that even during the pandemic, that's when I literally declared myself an artist. But backtracking, I was the girl who like shot yearbook. I was the yearbook designer. I was the yearbook editor. I love this idea of documenting and preserving, life and helping people remember the things that were important. And I think history gives context, and so it helps me understand people and living. And so I went to school to be a journalist, and I learned mostly writing. I only took one formal photography class in my entire life. And it was a black and white one.
Wow.
Yeah, one. And the rest, thanks to, YouTubes and tutorials and small workshops and that sort of thing, I pieced together a wedding photography career. And honestly, my first editor, when I was at a small paper in Cleburne, Texas, which is just outside Fort Worth, he gave me a camera for my assignments, and he's like, you got to shoot, for your stories, and it needs to be in manual, and you just have to figure it out. And that was my introduction into photojournalism. And I'll never forget it because I was so overwhelmed, but I was like, well, I mean, I have to do it. It's my job. Like, I just had this like urgency. So I just would shoot on assignment, and it was always like you had to get the shot. So I did whatever I needed to do it. And then I ended up at another small paper, and it was just too daunting to cover an entire city of more than 100,000 people by myself. And I had to quit that job because it was impossible. And then I worked at a large church doing media and photography. So I'd shoot in the worst circumstances, which are like dark rooms, no windows, you have to be quiet. And it was like, that was a good training ground for weddings. And then shooting weddings, I did that for, I guess if I were still continuing, it would be 15 years altogether.
Wow.
And it was a great career and I absolutely loved it. And I had so much joy in doing that. But like, I wouldn't even necessarily have called myself an artist. I would have still just called myself a wedding photographer. Like it's a very specific skill set, to like bring together the personalities and love and connection of a couple. But I don't necessarily think I would call that art. I would do maybe a few artful images, but I still wouldn't say I was an artist. But when I was during the pandemic, when all the weddings shut down and I was trying to figure out how to make it, I picked up a job as a real estate photographer. And I thought, well, this is just another type of photography. Like, it'll be fine. It'll just help me stay in it until this blows past. And 2 months into that, and I was ready to throw my camera out the window. I
Oh my
hated
God.
it. I hated everything I was doing. My hands hurt. I hated the technicalness. There was no interaction with people. It was, four walls and emptiness. And I was like, I have so much more to offer the world than this. And I like literally declared myself, I was like, I'm an artist. It's official. This is nonsense. I'm not doing this anymore. And I quit. And like, I had bought all new gear for this. Like I was all into like, this is my new career. And I hated it so much. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to do the complete opposite of this. And I'm going to go shoot whatever it is that I want to do. And I moved to San Diego from Dallas to be somewhere beautiful. Dallas is a great place to live, great economy, wonderful people, great place to have a family, but it's not pretty. Like it's concrete, it's highways. It's just a million highways in suburban towns. And I was like, well, if I could be a photographer anywhere, San Diego sounds pretty amazing. So I moved out here to be somewhere beautiful. And then I had nothing but time. So the pandemic took away people. It took away all my job opportunities. And I was like, well, I have time. And it started with this idea that like, well, I'll just do like a Beaches of San Diego project. Like I'm just going to do a little personal project and shoot the beaches for myself because that's why I moved here. And then I was like doing this book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Yep.
A very famous, fabulous book. So I finally,
been there,
in
done
my
that.
pandemic time, we're unlocking all the creative barriers and we're dreaming. And the dream went from the beaches of San Diego to the beaches of Southern California. So I was like, well, what if I did all of California? I was like, that'd be a really beautiful book. And then I was like, well, let's just really make it crazy. Like, what if I shot the whole coast in 30 days? And I'm like looking around to see if anything like this has really been done. And it hadn't. And I was like, all right, that sounds great. Like, let's do something kind of big, kind of crazy, kind of hard. I'm just going to go by myself. I'm going to camp. And I've never been camping before.
Oh my God.
Camp in my car for 30 days. And all I'm going to do is hike. And again, I'm a Dallas girl. Like, we don't hike. Like, we walk around a mall and like we go have drinks and it's fun. I was like, I'm gonna hike and I'm gonna do what Californians do and we're gonna sleep in our car and like I just kind of went for it. And I like watched a few videos. I was like, okay, I could do this. And it was like all these things together being like, let's just see what happens. Like that's the fun part about being an artist is like even if you're a painter, like the palette just speaks to you. You're putting together a color palette or you start something on a canvas and things just evolve. And even as a photographer, I wanted to allow all the impossibilities and like going out to shoot it, I had no idea what I was going to do, but I wrote every day. I wrote on every beach. I was, going through all the images. And then when I came home, I had like named all the images by the mileage of my car because I thought that'd be a really cute way to name the images for my collection. But then I was like, well, I have this really cool like visual journey of the whole coast. I was like, there wasn't a day I didn't shoot and there wasn't enough that I missed that I like everything ended up being open. So Highway 1 ended up opening up and like during all the wildfires. And so I was like, I think I was just like putting it together. It was like I had all these puzzle pieces and then it just came together as this like ginormous 555 page book. And I was like, I think I just wrote a book, and I like put it all together and I was like, this is pretty amazing. I wonder what I can do with this. And so then I like went through the process of putting it together into a 32-piece collection, which was a different fun experience I can share. But that's kind of the journey I've had as an artist, was kind of coming to a place of like, I've been doing stuff for other people my whole life. Like wedding photography or portrait photography is really like a service-based artistry. And it's wonderful, but like it's not for me. Like I'm doing it to serve other people. And this was my opportunity as an artist to share what I saw in the world and what I found to be beautiful or captivating or life changing or mind changing, spirit changing, and I think that's that little bit of that artist unlocking for me.
That's absolutely mind blowing. Kudos to you. Like there's like in your story, it was like, yeah, 15 years doing photography, and then boom, like
Yeah.
practically in 1 year, you just changed your life entirely, from moving like to a different city to
Yeah.
like quitting your job and packing your gear and going like all the way to the West Coast. It's crazy. It is just crazy. Oh my God, I'm listening to you. I'm like, I'm so proud of you. Like, I don't know why.
Thank you.
I'm just so proud of you.
Trust me, this is not like it's like I read something else recently, somebody saying like, yeah, it is super scary. And to be honest, like I might have to go get a full-time job because I'm not making enough money yet. And like I've been on this artist journey and like it's wonderful. And I think anybody who's been put in contact with my book has had, if they sit with it, if they allow themselves time to observe and understand, they're inspired, and that is like the greatest joy I can imagine sharing with people in this world. But like all of it has been slightly terrifying. Like it's been steps of bravery in every bit of it, like hiking alone through, on the edge
Yeah.
of cliffs,
Oh my
like I'm
God.
literally putting myself out there constantly, like tiptoeing to the edge. But that's like also the name of my book, is like Revealed at the Edge. And it has so many meanings, but one of them being that like you really don't see things unless you put yourself out there. And then what's revealed about you when you're in that experience is so different than maybe you ever knew was there. And so like the practice of it being that like every time I'd walk out to the edge of a cliff, I would get closer and closer and closer. And the more I could see over, the more I was like, oh my gosh, this is flipping cool. But like you don't see it unless you're brave enough to go to see it.
Yeah, it's so true.
And it is really scary. So, I mean, you just kind of do it, but you do it scared. And then you're like, that was awesome. I'm going
Yeah,
to
be
keep
afraid
doing
and
it.
do it anyway. Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
think I would
Yeah.
ever do anything like this, honestly. I'm
You
so
never
afraid.
know. You never, if you can keep
Yeah,
yourself open to it, who knows,
true. We'll see. We'll see. All right. I have a couple of questions about your collection and the book and how you made it and how you published it. But I wanted to ask you first another question. You have worked with people up until the pandemic. So your entire career was with people and you enjoyed the
Mhm.
wedding photography and everything. So, and then you switched to photographing the nature and with people nowhere around.
Mhm.
What do you enjoy personally more, the revealing the personalities of people and that aspect, or you find more joy being like in nature and solitude and photographing that?
Yeah. Honestly, they're two different things I really enjoy. I'm like an introverted extrovert, so I have no problems being alone. I really do recharge. I can sit on a beach by myself for 3 hours and be wildly content. I can also be in the middle of a dance floor with 150 people, literally in the middle of it, dancing, singing, shooting, and having a ball. So they're just two very different parts of me, and getting to explore this other part and then like being vulnerable enough to write and share about my internal world has been wonderful. And I think that's just how we are as people, right? There's different layers to us, there's different parts we share with different people. And I think we grow and evolve throughout life, and like who you were in your 20s created who you were in your 30s, and like you're just, I don't know who I'm going to be in my 40s, but all of these experiences and skills and things I'm doing will somehow create the next version of who I'll be later. And so I don't know, they're all really fun. Like I freaking love weddings. Like I have like 120 reviews on the Knot of my clients being like, she's the best. And I'm like, thanks guys. Like I loved it. And I would still do it, but there's so much that's changed in the wedding industry after the pandemic. Like the joy of it, the joy of weddings was really stripped away in California. And there was so much anxiety and delays and money and everything that would stress people out. And like I don't want to be in a stressed out situation, like I don't want to document that. Like there's just things shifted. And so I have to learn to adapt with it. And if I can still do it, I would do it. But this is where I'm trying to throw everything I have at it. But I don't know, being the introvert photographer alone in the coast is pretty rad too, because I'd be like the only person out there for 100 miles. And I was like, the world is amazing and nobody's here to see it. So it's like my hope in sharing that, like, as there's more, it's like being a pioneer in a way and just reminding people that like the world is beautiful, like go experience it and see how you change.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Hey, In the Arts Scene listeners, do you remember Mark O'Donnell from Pixel 2 Editions? He's been on the show in Season 3, Episode 7 and told us everything we need to know about giclée printing. And take my word for it, Mark and his team are the best in Southern California and beyond. I've been a client of Pixel 2 Editions since 2019, and I've been shouting about them from the rooftops ever since. Luckily, I don't have to do it anymore because I have a podcast. Despite being San Diego local, Mark and his team are working with some of the best photographers and artists from all states, including Clark Little and Kadir Nelson. And frankly, if you are a photographer or a digital artist, you don't need to be local to work with Pixel 2 Editions. Just use a file upload on their website for your heavy images and write down the specs. They can print small proofs for you on any substrate you want and ship them to you for free. And for my listeners, they offer a free 8x10 full image proof on metal. Just tell them that you heard about them on the podcast and they will take care of you. Let me tell you, their metal prints are amazing. Whenever I order mine, they fly off the shelves in no time. So I highly recommend you try it out. And oh, did I mention that they are a full service company? It means that they do everything from color correcting and printing to framing and shipping directly to you or your clients. So don't wait, go to pixel2editions.com, 2 is a number, and editions is plural, or call 858-549-7299. Again, pixel2editions.com, 2 is a number, and editions is plural, or call 858-549-7299. Say hi for me. All right, so let's talk about the book. So you put together the book by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Did you publish by yourself?
I did. So I chose self-publishing in the end. So what the path was I got back in October. I had culled all the images from the trip while I was on the road. So I'd get back to my car at night. I'd download everything. I'd select all the images that I was going to edit later, so that when I came home, I didn't have 28,000 images to edit. I had 7,000 I'd narrowed down. And then I edited those 7,000 images over 3 months. So I gave myself a deadline. I was like, I'm going to be done with the images by December, 31st. And then I was going to have the first draft of the book done by the end of January. So I had about 55, 60 essays. It ended up being about 70 because once I was laying out the book, I saw spaces of things I wanted to write about. And so giving it a flow, I was a designer, a graphic designer, and as the yearbook girl who laid out pages of newspapers, this was all like a very easy skill set I'd acquired. So I designed the book and put it all out there and then saw the holes, finished out the writing by the end of January. And then February, March were my months to research the publication process. So I reached out to traditional publishers, hybrid publishers, and self-publishing companies. and basically weighed my options because I'm a no-name photographer. Nobody knows who I am. And getting the buy-in from a traditional publisher would have been a much longer road, and then also a potentially less financially viable road because they make most of the money because they do all the work, you know? And then hybrid publishing, I just didn't find a company that was a good fit. I talked to a self-publisher who basically he gave me the numbers, and as a business person, I was like, okay, I could sell 2,000 copies of my book versus a traditional publisher selling 34,000 copies of my book to make the same amount of profit.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, there's no way I'm going to sell 34,000 copies of my first book right off the bat. I was like, maybe in 10, 20 years, if I keep on this path, like maybe. But I was like, 2,000 copies is really scary, but like, it seems kind of doable, you know, like the realm of possibilities there. And I joke with my friends, but it feels like I'm selling Girl Scout cookies, right? I have my cookie goal and I just have to sell this many to go to summer camp, right? So it's like, if I can just sell this many books, surely I can find the home, you know, a home for this book with 2,000 people. So that's why I chose that. And then I started working on, okay, well, if I'm self-publishing, I'm going to do a Kickstarter so that I can fund the print run with pre-sales ahead of time. So I'm not out of pocket everything to produce the book. So I started all the pieces I needed to run a Kickstarter. I had a short film made. I had pictures taken like for studio for like my author portraits, and then I had on this, you know, on the scene pictures, you know, at the beach shooting. So I had some behind the scenes images, and then I'm putting together this little campaign, and like then I start a Kickstarter. So then the Kickstarter goes through, and it's also terrifying because if you don't make the goal, you don't get the money. Like you don't get even what you raised. So it's like a make or break
Oh, I didn't know
situation.
that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and I did that because like the idea in crowdfunding is that like you're bringing people together to help you accomplish something. And I find that people generally want to help people achieve their dreams. Like it's just like a human nature to be like, well, we can do this together. So I chose Kickstarter because of that. Because if I didn't have enough money to do it, then I couldn't have done it. You know, it's just like even if I had $10,000, that won't help me with a $60,000 project. So that's why I chose that. And then it's just been the process of dealing with publishing during a pandemic when there are paper shortages
Oh,
and
yeah.
employment shortages and shutdowns. And like, that wasn't an easy, honestly, it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
So,
Again,
but you're like,
your timing is impeccable.
it's
Like, it's
unbelievable,
crazy. Oh my
right? Like
God.
just no ease at all, you know?
Wow.
So so that's kind of that process. So in the meantime, I'm like preparing, okay, well, I all this started because I felt like I was called to do a show. And I was like, a show of what? And so I came up with this idea to shoot the whole coast and make a show from that. So when I'm putting together the fine art collection, the book was about 320 images, and I printed them all out in 4x6s and put them all out on my table. And I was talking to my best friend. We've been friends since like fourth grade, and we love Project Runway. And she's like, well, what if you did it like a color collection? Like you tell a color story, because even in fashion lines, sometimes the color's the story of the collection. So I was like, oh, well, that's a fun idea. You know, I'm just working different puzzles to see what will work. And this story just like emerges from the images of this like starting in a place of like peace and beauty, and then something traumatic and horrific happening, and then the smoke and blowout of that. So it goes from like bright and beautiful, peaceful to something, to the smoke, like the darkness and the aloneness, and then that kind of playing out from like a darkness to a lightening. And then there's like a pivot point. I have this one image that I shot in the Lost Coast, which is this crazy part of California. And the smoke had turned up over the mountains and started coming back across. And I
Yeah.
thought I'd avoided it. And I'm out there and I'm like waiting for the sun to set a little bit. And then this smoke cloud just comes straight across, and it's horrifying. And I'm like, this is my nightmare. Like we're still in this, like we haven't evaded it. But in the image, it's a sun and the coast, and then half darkness and half sunlight. And it just became the corner piece of this collection, because then everything after the collection is like the sun coming back in, the light coming back in, and then being restored to a place of peace and tranquility. And like this has so many different metaphors and meanings for me. One, as a Christian, I see it as like God's redemption story, played out through images, but like it is universal in that I think we've all had moments in our life that like trauma or something happened to us that affected us in such a way that like we weren't the same for a while, and like there were times of darkness and solitude, and then something happens where like the light comes back in and we're restored to a place of peace. And so it's this beautiful collection told of basically, how I've put it is like the images are like it's like a story of the landscape of our inner landscape. So the outer landscape is like a visual metaphor of our internal landscape.
Mm-hmm.
It's told through that lens. So that collection is completely different than a visual, like mile by mile journey account that's in the book. So it's like I really came away with two large projects because they both have two different messages and journeys, but from the same content.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you have a show?
I did. Yeah. I had a show, which was amazing because, again, as an artist who'd never done a show, I like called around. The second place I called said, yeah, do whatever you want and just let us know what dates you want to do it. And I was like, this is way too easy. Like, and that's that grit, that comes sometimes, like, and also like when you're doing what you feel like you're called to do, I feel like God makes a way. And it was just wonderful. I had a great show. It was meant to be the book launch, but because of all the delays and stuff, it really was like a soft launch for the book, which was a huge bummer. But the show was great. I had it up for 4 weeks, and I'm looking forward to finding new places to show it. And then each piece is just a beautiful standalone piece that if I can find the right galleries who would represent me as an artist would be wonderful.
That's amazing. Okay. So I want you to give a tip to anyone who's listening who has an idea and wants to put out the show. So you said you just called places, and what did you say? And where did you end up having the show?
Yeah. So I looked at different venues within the San Diego area. I looked for places that might be about the same stage as my journey. So I looked for places that were new, right? I'm a new artist. They're a new venue. They're a new art-centric anything. The place I ended up having it was a place called 1835 Creative Studios.
Mm-hmm.
They were, it's a new co-working art space, an event space, and they had this empty room that was like perfect, and like they weren't sure what they were going to do with it. And I was like, this is a gallery. I mean, it's white walls and concrete, and it's a blank canvas. I was like, it's perfect. And so we had it there. I had like a musician, I had a taco truck, I had, just all the images. I had like a full product table. And I made it like what I thought a cool party would be to share,
Mm-hmm.
And I worked with a local printer who does fine art printing. So he helped me refine like the technical side of printing for me. And honestly, it's like everything else in life. Like if there's something you really want to do, there's got to be a way. So like a school, I had a friend who did like her show at a library. There's plenty of venues that are an open space. And like, if you're bold enough, you can do it on the street somewhere. Like you can make it whatever you want it to be. And if people believe in you, they'll believe in your vision and they'll help you do what you want to do. So I would just say, be really clear about what you want to do. And, it's just getting on the phone with people and saying a pitch like, hi, I'm a new artist. I have my first collection. This is what it is. I have this many people I'd love to invite. How can we do this together? And I knew I didn't want to just do a one night show and have it up for one night. I had this dream of like having an opening and a closing, and then I had
Mm-hmm.
artist talks, and I went in and I like shared like the process of making the book with people. I had like a events industry event in my space. So I tried to think of as many ways to draw different people to the event, which was a win for the venue and a win for me.
Amazing. That's amazing. And I think you just dropped the keyword in there, be bold enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard. It's terrifying putting your heart out there in the world and like being like,
Oh,
will anybody receive this?
yeah.
Like, will this do anything for anybody?
I have a question. After this crazy journey, are you afraid of anything anymore?
Yeah, I'm terrified. I don't want to get a 9 to 5 job, but I guess we have to do what we have to do and like, you know, that kind of thing. I have lots of fears, but I just keep trying to push past them and I like try to identify why I'm afraid and see what's out there. But like I'm really inspired by other people's stories. I mean, the reason I ended up moving to California in general was because I'd read this story about a woman who went to Costa Rica to a surf camp, left her banking job in London to design bikinis, and like gave up her whole life to like live in the tropics. And I was like, that made me go to a surf school and fall in love with surfing. And then that led me to living living on the coast in the neighborhood I chose. And it's like I've seen other people go ahead of you and say, you know what, I don't have to live life the same way that everybody else has and it can be awesome and rad and it can be exactly what I hope it can be. Like that's inspiring to me. And so I hope that somebody takes this and it spurs that idea that's been buried in their mind that says, I want to do this. And then there's so many reasons why we say like, no, I'm not going to do it anymore, or they get stopped. And it might just still like be like, but you could do it. And it's like that thing that like maybe you were created to do this. It's that thing that like who knows what you do is going to impact other people. And like we're created for community, and like the gifting that you have to interview people and share stories and to share about art because you have a passion for it. Like you were created to do this, and like the stories you're sharing can inspire so many people. And like a lot of people would be terrified to start a podcast, you
Oh, I
know?
was terrified. I was absolutely
Yeah.
terrified.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're doing that same thing. Like you're pushing past that fear, being like, I've never, taken a radio class. I've never done, public speaking, whatever it is that led you to just say, I'm going to do it because you were passionate about it. And now look at what that does for so many people. Like anybody listening in gets to come away with some story or inspiration or idea that then will impact them. Maybe not today, because like that random story I read about the bikini lady, like it cracks me up because I'm like, I don't even like it was just something I randomly read in like Entrepreneur magazine, you know? And there was some reporter who decided this was a cool story to share. And so I'm living a story and a life that I think is interesting and fun and try to make the absolute best of it. And, I've already went out and I photographed the East Coast for 30 days
Oh,
in
you
hopes that
did?
I can, yeah, I went
Okay.
for it. And I'm
Wow.
just hoping I get to make a second book, but the process of it, people are like, aren't you afraid to like be alone and do all this stuff? And I was like, I love it. It's scary and it's freeing, you know, it's great to be free of what you're afraid of by just doing it.
That's the beautiful way to put it. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now, well, okay, there's more to the story. It's amazing. So, first question: how many copies of your book have you sold so far?
So I sold about 183 during my Kickstarter. I've sold about 300 altogether. So I got the book really in hand at the end of September. And as we're interviewing today, it's the end of December. So I had markets and art shows and all this kind of stuff. And to be honest with you, it's gone much slower than I anticipated. I it's just really it's been a really down year for sales for everybody because of the economy.
Yeah,
Like I'm selling a high piece luxury item and I've never sold a product before. I've never sold an item. So I've always sold like a service. So it's a whole different sales mentality and like I don't know anything about doing any of this. So I'm learning as I go and I'm like getting headway every little day, but it's just not been enough yet to, be able to scrap everything I'm doing. So that's why I'm pretty worried about getting a job. So I haven't
yeah.
been in a job in 15 years, so that's crazy.
Well, so your story is absolutely inspiring, and your words to the God's ears, if there are actually people listening to this podcast and being inspired by what they hear, there's plenty of copies of the book still available. So that's for you
Yeah.
guys out there. So before I start asking you about the East Coast, just tell everybody, if you are selling this book online, how people can find you. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so the easiest way is through Amazon, just because they handle like the distribution and shipping is like they ship books. So Amazon, and search for Revealed at the Edge. I will pop up. It is a gorgeous coffee table book. And you can also
And,
find it on my website, which is AllisonDavis.co. And that's where you'll find my collection, as well as my the fine art, archival, landscape imagery, and the book. And then that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm also in San Diego. So if you find me on Instagram at AllisonDavis.photography, I can bring you a book and I'll sign it for you. So
awesome. Awesome. Well, that's awesome. Okay. So, and make sure you check our show notes, because I will put all the links in the show notes so you don't have to memorize anything. So you guys,
perfect.
head out to our website and click the links. Okay. So you've done East Coast. When did you do that?
Yeah. So again, I had like those windows of time. I was waiting on the book, and I know enough about the East Coast weather that like there's hurricane season. So I had to go before hurricane season, but after Arcadia in Maine was open. So Arcadia doesn't open until like June 1st. And then they close just like early October. And October's too late. So it was like a small window of time. So I went on the end of July. I flew to Key West. I rented a car, and then I drove up to the top of Maine, to a town called Lubec, which my phone thought I was in Canada. So that's how far I went. It was like 4,200 something miles of driving that I did, and I just did the same thing. I knew about 100 to 150 miles a day. I'd have an idea of an ending spot, but I didn't camp this time because the East Coast is full of bugs. And like in Miami and stuff, it's 100 degrees. Like you
Oh
can't
my
camp in your
goodness.
car when it's like 100. So I had like crazy outfits to keep me from the sun. So I'd like be like covered head to toe with a hat. And I felt like a bird watching old woman. Like it was hilarious to me. I was like, anything for the shot, like we're just gonna go. And I just buy like a surf shirt somewhere. I was so ill prepared for how much the sun was gonna be an issue. And then I just marched my way up. And like the East Coast is weird because there's basically these barrier islands all along the entire East Coast. And so like you have to hop. And so it might be 10 miles on a map, but it's a 60-mile drive to get to
Wow.
that next area. And then there's also so much private property on the East Coast, whereas the West Coast is all accessible. And the East Coast, like in areas in Massachusetts, over 70% of coastal land is private property. So I'm still dealing with the pandemic. They still have closures for the beaches and stuff. Like if you don't live in the neighborhood, you cannot go to that beach. And so it was like, how do I tell a truthful, visual display of this coastline with these issues? And so it was definitely a challenge in that regard. But also like the East Coast is still full of wonder and beauty that like people they don't know it's there. Like my mom, when I was like showing her places I was shooting in Florida, she's like, you go to all the places that people in Florida don't even know exist. And I was like, I know, because there's nobody here. And it's still this wild wilderness. Like my favorite place I shot on the East Coast, besides this really cool trail I did in Maine, was in South Carolina. And it was a state park. And it was like, I didn't know there were so many palm trees and tropical vibes and like alligators. It was just such a cool park. I just had no idea it was there. And like, you think of South Carolina, you think of like Charleston. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like there's this beautiful natural world, an hour from there. It's
Wow.
crazy to me. So there's so
Wow.
much that thankfully, like, I've never been like a huge fan of like really big government, but big government in protecting our natural spaces is a gift. And honestly, a lot of the East Coast, the parts that aren't developed, weren't developed because the land shifts so much they can't build on it. So they were like, well, if we can't build on it, we might as well just protect it, And so it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because otherwise we would just have like Miami skyscrapers the whole way up the entire coast. But even like in New Jersey, there's still protected land and like all these areas. It's a beautiful place.
Wow, and it's such a different experience.
So different. And so like I'm excited to like create the two, because they're like the bookends of America, and like also just the place on the edge that people don't go, So I'm hoping it like opens up, not in like the let's make it an Instagrammable world spot, but like just so people can enjoy the world, it's there, there's plenty of land to go explore.
Yeah. So did you do this journey in 2022?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
So July through August.
2 years apart from the first book. And are you planning on the new Kickstarter?
So it all depends on how quickly I can sell out of this book. So if I can sell, get momentum in selling and getting places for, if a big box store picks up my book, like West Elm or Crate and Barrel, that's like a dream. Then I will have like the momentum to say, okay, well, now we're doing the second one. So I'll do the second one as a Kickstarter, because I already have built and I'm building an audience. And like some people, they watched my journey. So if you followed me on Instagram, I've shared every day, and I have some of the highlights on my Instagram as well as the East Coast. So you can go back and see some of that journey. So the Kickstarter is a wonderful way for you to get capital for your project. So if you have a dream, it's a great way to share it with people, and you never know if something will get picked up. So, you have to market it and you have to do your part, but there's a lot of opportunity.
That's great. Oh, well, okay. So let's put it out there in the universe, a little message to West Elm and
yes.
and Crate and Barrel.
Please. It's a beautiful book. So yeah.
It is a beautiful book.
That's kind of what,
you guys, I have seen this. I have seen the book. I held it in my hands. It is an amazing and beautifully produced, just stunning coffee book, with absolutely mind-blowing imagery. So if you are interested, and now knowing so much of the context, so go head out to Allison's website, and I'll put all the links down below. So
yeah. Thank you.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that I found you on that art walk, and we got connected, and I got to share your story. It's great. It's amazing.
I know. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate any opportunity to share, and appreciate your platform and your interest in my story, because I hope like in sharing it inspires people. Like that's the end of goal of being an artist, is like to be an inspiration. And it's still scary, but happy to be here for it. So
well, thank you so much for your time. And you guys, if you like this podcast, please leave us a review, share it with your friends. I don't know, share it anywhere, and just put some stars. Well, 5 is better than any. So other people can easily find us, because we really need more people to hear these inspiring stories. So yeah, and follow us on Instagram. Check out our website. We have very detailed show notes for every guest we have. So every episode has a blog post with a bio, with some imagery, with all the links and references that we were talking about. So yeah. I will really appreciate if you support the podcast this way. And Allison, thank you so much for being with me today, and thank you so much for sharing your story. And I will see you next time in the art scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has been another episode of In the Art Scene podcast. If you liked today's conversation, please give us a good review on Apple, and go listen to other great stories. Check out our website intheartscene.com, or follow us on Instagram at intheartscene for more content. If you are a creative and you want to share your story, shoot us a message from the website or DM us on Instagram. Look forward to seeing you next time in the art scene.